So, hello, come back to another episode of the Self-Development with Tactics podcast. And yet again, you can see in the background the path to better thinking through puzzles and also riddles. An article published, very important to note, published on Tim Ferriss' blog site, which is tim.blog, period. But it is a guest article, so it is written by A.J. Jacobs, the best-selling author of the book The Puzzler, One Man's Quest to Solve the Most Baffling Puzzles Ever, from crosswords to jigsaws and the meaning of life, a few TED Talks, and so on and so forth. Yesterday, I think it was, I already went through a bit of it, so we are going ahead with what I have left. I went through Math Puzzles 1.0, Problem 79, and I think also way outside the box. So today we're going ahead with how to solve problems. And I'm gonna go ahead right away. But how do you get yourself to think outside the box? How do you approach a math problem? I know how to start a jigsaw puzzle. Do edges usually and a crossword, look for plurals and fill in the sess. But how do you approach a math problem? After talking to Tanya, who is a Russian I think teacher or lecturer. There's a bit of an introduction to her in the last episode, so if you're interested, check it out. She is, let me quickly have a look so that you could look it up if you're interested. Well, they're probably gonna say it. It is Tanya, and I think when you're Googling Tanya puzzles or Tanya riddles or whatnot, you'll probably gonna find it. After talking to Tanya and another great math puzzle expert, Dartmouth Professor Peter Winkler, I've come up with a list of tools for math and logical problems or logic problems, and here are 3 of my favorites. The first one is reverse it. When confronted with a problem, try reversing it. Turn it upside down, sometimes quite literally turn it upside down, such as this problem. What number belongs in a blank in this sequence? It's 87, turn the page upside down to see why. Yes, because it is then 89, 88, 86, 88, 89, 90, and 91, and what is in between, it is 87. There are other puzzles that require you to reverse your thinking in a slightly less literal way, like this one. A man is imprisoned in a 10-foot by 10-foot by 10-foot room. The walls are made of concrete. The floor is made of dirt, and the only openings are a locked door and a skylight. The man has a small shovel and starts to dig a hole in the floor. He knows that it is impossible to tunnel out of the prison cell, but he continues to dig away. What is the man's plan? Pause here if you want to figure it out yourself. I would actually like to, but I think that I do not have the time to do so. The solution is, the man wasn't just digging a hole, he was also doing the opposite, building a little mountain of dirt, and his plan was to climb the mountain and get to the skylight. I love reversing my thinking. Earlier this week I was cleaning up the trail of clothes left by the males in our family, including me, that littered our apartment. I picked up an armload of clothes, then went to the hamper in my bedroom and dumped the clothes, and then went back out. But wait, what if I took the hamper with me? If I bring the hamper to the clothes, I would save myself several trips. As Will Shortz once suggested, I took a bow. B-O-W. Figure out the real goal. One of my favorite brain teasers comes from Martin Gardner, who wrote a famous monthly column about math puzzles in Scientific America for 3 decades. Starting in 1962, he died unfortunately in 2010, but he still has tons of devotes, hundreds of whom attend a biannual event, The Gathering for Gardner, where they talk puzzles, paradoxes, and the genius of Martin. Gathering 4 with the number 4 Gardner, if you want to look that up as well. Martin posed this puzzle in his book Entertaining Mathematical Puzzles. 2 boys on bicycles 20 miles apart began racing directly toward each other The instant they started, a fly on the handlebar of one bicycle started flying straight forward, towards the other cyclist. As soon as it reached the other handbar, it turned and started back. The fly flew back and forth in this way from handbar to handbar until the two bicycles met. If each bicycle had a constant speed of 10 miles an hour and the fly flew at a constant speed of 15 miles an hour, how far did the fly fly? Pause here if you want to try it yourself. Spoilers ahead. So you could also, by the way, pause this podcast episode, maybe go back 15 seconds. If you're in a YouTube video, that's great. You can read it yourself. Or you go to the website and look for Two Boys on Bicycle. If you search on the page, you're gonna find it very quickly. So how do you solve this? Most people's first instinct, including mine, is to trace the back and forth path of the fly and try to add up the distance. With this method, you'd try to calculate the distance from biker's first handlebars to biker's second handlebars. Then the fly would make a U-turn, so you'd calculate the next distance from biker to biker, or biker 1 to biker 2, and so on until the bikes met. This turns out to be a highly complex computation involving the speed of the bikers, the speed of the insect, and time and distance. The operation is called summing an infinite series. This calculation is impossible to do in your head. Well, practically impossible. Legend has it that the brilliant Hungarian mathematician John von Neumann, which is probably really interesting because I'm thinking John von Neumann is a very Germanish or Austrianish or Swiss name, and it would make sense. Austro-Hungarian Empire, quote-unquote empire or country, which once was a thing, might explain that. Yeah, this is kind of my point. Was once asked this brain teaser at a party, and to the amazement of the quizzer gave the correct answer by summing the infinite series in his head. No fucking calculator needed. Von Neumann was too smart for his own good. If he had paused for a moment, he might have realized there is a much easier way to solve this problem, which brings me back to the strategy. What is the real goal? You want to phrase the problem in the simplest possible way. Strip the problem to its basics and you'll realize you're looking for one thing: the distance the fly can fly in an allotted amount of time. You can ignore the fly's back and forth switch of directions. You can ignore the handlebars. They are irrelevant. You just need to know how far the insect can go in the time it takes the bikes to meet, which turns out to be a pretty easy calculation. If each bike was going at 10 miles per hour and they were 20 miles apart, then it would take the bikes 1 hour to reach each other. So the fly was buzzing around for 1 hour. What is the distance the fly can cover in 1 hour? Well, it's going 15 miles per hour, so the answer is 15 miles. We often complicate problems when there is an easier method right in front of us. I think this is true in more than just math puzzles. I'm not sure if this is exactly analogous, I guess, but it is staring me in the mirror, so let me tell you about an example. Recently, I was faced with the puzzle of how to cut my own hair. During quarantine, I couldn't go to the barber, and Julie claimed she wasn't qualified. I had to do it myself using YouTube tutorials. My first attempt to cut my own hair had mixed results. The front turned out okay, but the harder to reach back of my head was a disaster filled with uneven patches. So I paused, I rephrased the problem. The goal is not to cut my hair flawlessly. The goal is to look respectable on Zoom, and on Zoom no one ever sees the back of my head. So the simple solution: just cut the front of my hair and leave the back alone to grow wild and fuzzy or free. Puzzle solved, though for the first time in my life I do have a mullet, or mullet, or whatever you fucking call it. The third, break it down into manageable chunks. One type of logic puzzle, often called Fermi problems, provides excellent training for solving some real-life problems. A Fermi problem is one like this. How many tuners are there in New York City? You have to estimate the size of something about which you are totally ignorant. If you just take a wild guess without reflecting, you'll probably be off by ordering a magnitude. Instead, as David Epstein explains in a psychology book, Range-wide generalists triumph in a specialized world. The best method is to break the problem down into parts you can reasonably estimate. As Epstein's writes, how many households are in New York? What portion might have pianos? How often are pianos tuned? How long might it take to tune a piano? How many homes can one tuner reach in a day? And how many days a year does a tuner work? You won't guess it exactly, but you'll be much more likely to be in the ballpark. As Epstein writes, none of the individual estimates has to be particularly accurate in order to get a reasonable overall answer. I would think that if I am guessing 10 numbers, so there is a set of 10 numbers. Let's say it is 1, 5, 6, 7, and so on and so forth. And I'm guessing the numbers, and I know the numbers are in between 1 and 10, for example. I think the more numbers there are, the more accurate I am going to be. I would say, because, of course, when I'm having 3 numbers, then there is probably going to be a pretty big difference between my estimation or my guess and what the real number is. But the more there are, the smaller this margin gets. At least, I think this way. I don't know if this is right, but yeah. Epstein calls it an important tool in his conceptual Swiss Army knife. I too find it helpful when reading statistics from dubious media sources or listening to wild cocktail party speculation. Breaking problems into chunks even works when trying to motivate yourself. Take the puzzle of how you can get my lazy butt to walk the treadmill for a few minutes a day. If I say to myself, you have to walk on the treadmill for an hour today, you will delay this task forever. So I break it down. I put the big picture out of my mind. First, I tackle the sub-goal of putting on my sneakers. I can do that. Then the sub-goal of turning the treadmill on. Well, I can do that. And just step onto the rubber belt for just 5 minutes. I can do that, and eventually I am walking and realize this isn't so bad. I can do this. I stay on for the full hour. As quote-unquote dumb as it may sound, but it is something that Tim Ferriss has spoken about. I don't want to say so often, but a few times I'd say, especially when it comes to building habits, like really starting small, really having extremely small chunks of what you're trying to achieve. For example, meditating. You don't have to fucking meditate for an hour. What about, and this is actually very interesting, what is meditating? Meditating, at least as I'm thinking about it, and I've done it for quite some time, but I've lost this habit. This is why I'm thinking about it. I have to sit down. I have to be quiet. I'll probably listen to something, and then I'm getting into my meditative state. So what is the first thing I need to do? Sit down and be quiet. Maybe sitting down in a certain position, in a certain place to make the habit a bit more, a bit easier to do, I think, because there is a cue, when I am in this place, I am meditating and I'm not doing something else. So I'm sitting down in this certain spot, at this certain spot, and maybe in this certain position, whatever. Okay, first thing done. Okay, what am I doing next? Maybe I'll take a few deep breaths. Maybe I am closing my eyes. Maybe I'm starting the app or the music or the voiceover or the whatever I'm listening to. Okay, step done. What am I doing now? I'm meditating. 2 minutes. I can do 2 minutes. Period. So I think, at least in my head, it makes things way easier. When I'm thinking about it, okay, I don't want to meditate, and I have this feeling quite often nowadays. I've always done it before I go to bed. Quite, if this is smart or not, depends on how you think about things. For me, it did work. But when I'm laying in my bed and I think, oh, I haven't meditated today. Okay, what is meditation? First of all, sitting up and sitting down. I think I can do that. Then I might just sit up. So I have done this thing. Okay, now I can close my eyes. It's a multitude of very, very, very small actions that I can take, that everyone can take, that in the end makes this big thing that we are all afraid of. Maybe if you have social anxiety or anxiety to call somebody, that I, by the way, also really dislike. I'm just, calling this number. Okay, I'm typing in the number. Okay, I have typed it in. I can now press the button. Okay, I press the button. Okay, and now I talk to this person. Okay, this might be a very, quote unquote bad example, because it is, it is something that involves some other issues, I guess, that one might be having or that I am having. But yeah, at least in my head, it makes things a bit easier. But with that being said, I'm going to end this episode here. I hope I've been able to share something of interest and something of value with you and or to you. And I'm going to see you the next time. So